Yeah, I think as a software engineer, the industry has changed over the last 2 decades.
Mm.
If you look back in the past, software engineers used to be what would be equivalent to mostly full stack developers now. The majority of roles, software engineering roles, are essentially full stack developers. Back then, I recall doing everything from the front end, the UI, to the actual application on the client side and server side and all kinds of areas. These days, the roles are much more defined if you were in a development role. It's more specialized now. But in terms of what I'm doing now and how different it is, I think I tend to look at more about the customer and see what exactly are the customer's needs, and also looking at them from different lenses, different perspectives. And then I look back into what we have in our toolkit to see how we can solve those problems and those needs, what the gaps are, how do we fill those gaps, and then the approach that we take to do those. So it's very different, from writing code every day, thousands of lines a day, now to thinking on a higher level, solving problems on a whole.
Welcome to the Making the Career Leap podcast. I'm Lynn Loy, a talent advisor and recruiter based in Singapore. If you're thinking that it might just be time for you to change your current role or career, then this is absolutely the right podcast for you. In each episode, you can expect to hear the fascinating stories and perspectives of talented individuals I've met through my work and network. It gives me great pleasure to have these in-depth conversations that dive into the why, what, and how behind the big moves that these professionals have made across different domains and industries, as well as how they might have also enabled others to make similar career leaps. If you're new to the podcast or want to tell your friends about it, just visit makingthecareerleap.com to access all podcast episodes and transcripts. Or search for Making the Career Leap on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you prefer the video format, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/@careerpodcast. Hi Lionel, welcome to the Making the Career Leap podcast. Really nice to have you on the show today. We work together at Tricentis, and as the director of the pilot engineers team, I've been really impressed by how you've led the team as well as cared for the team, and I'm so glad to have you on today. To get us started, would you care to share perhaps one career myth that you found to be untrue? This is the same question that we pose to all guests. I'm really curious to hear your take on it.
Hi, Ling. Thanks for having me. Career myth. I'd probably say that one of the biggest career myths is about finding a passion. My little story about it is that I was in a software development field for quite a while, but software development wasn't my passion when I first started. It was actually more of the business analyst kind of role. But I gave software development a go based on my results. I did a lot better in software development than I did in the system analysis and design kind of roles.
Okay.
And I gave it a go. Eventually, I grew to love it. So finding a passion and doing that straight away is probably a big career myth.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing a story that I think people can relate to. The roles that your passions may not align with maybe what you're best at, right? In this case. And I think that's something to think about before we start selecting the first role. Could you maybe introduce yourself and share a little bit more about, what you do in your current role as the director of the pilot engineers?
Sure. So personally, I have a passion for technology, innovations, and achieving results. So I do like to learn and explore new domains. I also believe in continuous improvements in terms of personal self, and I take every opportunity to expand my skill sets. My current role, I mentor, lead, and drive a team, and we as a team deliver technical success for our customers' problems. And this could include things like solutioning, customizing, and demonstrating our products to solve the pains of our prospects and customers.
So apart from learning and continuing to learn, I'm just curious, what are some of the things that, are of interest to you, and how has that changed over the time, right? Is it still very technically focused, or as you've become a people manager, you've broadened the topics that you've been learning or been curious about?
Yeah, so I've definitely spent a lot less time on the actual tools these days, a bit more time in PowerPoint and Excel. I still do get my hands dirty, and I think that's also important because you need to kind of relate to what your team's doing. You need to keep yourself aware as to your team's objective and what they go through. But definitely, as a people manager, you do need to have also the foresight and organizational skills and management skills to be effective in your role.
So I guess if you look back, right, now that when you're kind of leading a team across the region, actually, right, in terms of how it is different from the first job that you had today, I think the first role that you initially started off with, like you shared earlier, was really more in software development as a software engineer. So, what is that biggest difference do you feel looking back at that journey?
Yeah, I think as a software engineer, the industry has changed over the last 2 decades. If you look back in the past, software engineers used to be what would be equivalent to mostly full stack developers now. The majority of roles, software engineering roles, are essentially full stack developers. Back then, I recall doing everything from the front end, the UI, to the actual application on the client side and server sides and all kinds of areas. These days, the roles are much more defined if you were in a development role. It's more specialized now. But in terms of what I'm doing now and how different it is, I think I tend to look at more about the customer and see what exactly are the customer's needs, and also looking at them from different lenses, different perspectives. And then I look back into what we have in our toolkit to see how we can solve those problems and those needs, what the gaps are, how do we fill those gaps, and then the approach that we take to do those. So it's very different, from writing code every day, thousands of lines a day, now to thinking on a higher level, solving problems on a whole.
Yeah, actually, I would love to dig a little bit more into that, because one of the key reasons why I wanted to have you on as well is because we do hire for solution architects that are part of the pilot engineering team. I'm just curious to make that leap from being more technically focused to coding to becoming a solution architect. How big of a leap is that? And how did you decide that, that's the kind of switch that you wanted to make for yourself?
Yeah, good question. So I think the leap is quite different in the sense that as a software engineer, you tend to write code that's been broken down already for you. You've got requirements. You write code that addresses a specific for that requirement. In terms of a solution architect, you're kind of a few steps before it, in the sense that the customer may not know what's required to solve it. They just know that they have a problem. You kind of have to sit down, analyze it, and say, okay, these are the needs, or these are what they're trying to get to. How do you solve it? You've got to break it down, understanding it could be timing, schedules you need to adhere to, priorities, problems of different scales and different objectives. So analyzing all of those and then breaking them down smaller pieces and then trying to see what you have, because what you may have only solves a portion of it, which may leave a fairly big gap in something else. Then what can you do to fill those gaps? Is it something that you could potentially fill in with, or is it something that the customer or prospect may need to fill in with something else? But a lot of it is really about thinking a big picture. The customer may not necessarily know what they want. They know where they want to get to, but they don't know what they want. So how do you get them there? And that's quite different from just coding.
So I guess if we look at how you've kind of articulated the differences, and to me, as we have gone through hiring of some of these roles, I can tell that's what the hiring managers are also looking for, and the stakeholders, right? Like this person can help to identify what is the real problem before recommending the solution as an option to the customer. But let's say if you look at it, the challenge of this role, when you were still doing the software engineering role, how do you get an inkling that this could be something that's suitable for you? Like you could think in the big picture and that would be something that you're good at doing before you make the leap. Can you tell us what the steps that, kind of happened before, or is it serendipity that got you into this space?
I'll actually take a little step back from that. I recall when I first got into software development, I initially said to myself, because I was more inclined to the business analyst kind of role, I said to myself, I'll try software development for 6 months and reevaluate when the time came to see if that's something I want to pursue or if I want to change. 6 months came and it was pretty good. So I quite enjoyed it. I gave another 6 more months. And when the second 6 months came, I actually then thought, you know what, software development is actually quite interesting. I've always enjoyed puzzles and solving problems. So that kind of grew on me as I've spent now 12 months in a software development role. That kind of grew on. And I was thinking, what's next? If I was to go down this journey, what do I want to do? And at that point, I set in my mind that I would like to aim to be a solution architect in about 10 years. That obviously was something which didn't happen. I did get there, but not in the time frame. Throughout that journey, I was constantly enrolling myself in multiple courses. Every year I would do at least 2 or 3 courses, some in online courses. Some could be in-person courses. Some could be short courses. Just constantly getting myself exposed to all these different courses for more technical skills. But also I engage with many who I saw as very successful in their role as a solution architect. And they helped me inspire to get better in terms of what I was doing. And the exposure to them and what they gave me, the information to help me improve myself. So when such an opportunity arises, I would be able to take it on.
Wow, that's really very proactive, Lionel. I think, in terms of the level of commitment to invest your time to learn, to network with people and learn from people who have come before you in the role that you're looking for. I don't know how common it is, but hopefully people who are hearing it can get a sense of the kind of level of dedication that you had.
There's actually a lot of people that do that. I used to go to a lot of meetups. From the tech field, if you go to meetups, you see a lot of like-minded people. Most of the time, these people who go to meetups are investing their own personal time to it. They go there because of common interests. They're not doing it because of work. They're doing it because they have a passion or it's something that interests them. So going to these kind of forums or these kind of scenarios gets you exposed to people who are investing more than what they need to in terms of just a job. It's more of a career or something which they enjoy. And building the relationships with those people there and helps you get exposed to a wide variety of people who are like-minded or potentially even more career-driven than you might be.
I think that's great to hear, right? Like in terms of the personal time that you've put into that. I'm just curious, was there also something that you discovered in your personal time where you had someone who was in a solution architect role that inspired you, which caused you to fix this as a goal that you have in mind? Or because I think in terms of setting some goals, we usually take inspiration from somewhere. So was it like someone, or is it just based on what you've researched about what roles sound exciting or appealing to you?
Yeah, it was actually someone. In fact, two people in one of my first roles. Seeing what they did. Yes, I was developing code and writing code, but seeing what they did made me think. What they're doing is pretty interesting. I was on the side chipping in here and there and getting some work from them in terms of, all right, they've done this solutioning, they've passed it on to developers. In terms of they do some writing of code, but the areas when they were more on the solution architect side of things, being exposed to that made me think that's what I really wanted to do. I quite enjoyed what I saw, and the little exposure I had made me say that that's something I want to drive towards.
Nice. So I think one thing that really struck me when you're describing this is you have different timelines. So you gave yourself 6 months to kind of say, okay, do I like software engineering? And then it's like, okay, it sounds the first 6 months are good. I'll go for another 6 months, and then see how just to there was this very quick feedback loop that you had there. So I'm just curious, going from that to that 10-year time frame that you had for becoming a solution architect, was that 10-year time frame that you had set for yourself also came from the exposure to other people that you've seen who have made similar leaps, or is that something that you've estimated based on all the requirements or foundational skills needed for the role, and it's your own estimate?
Yeah, it's a little bit of my own plus a bit of research at a time. I recall looking at, if I was to go down that path, what is the requirements for those kind of roles? So I recall looking at job ads, and they're all asked for between 5 to 8 years experience. A number of them asked for 10 years experience. And the people that I was working with, speaking to them, I asked them, how long do they, what kind of experience do they need, and how long did it take for them to get to that level? And after all that, talking to people and market research, I kind of landed on the number 10, just being as nice and round. And then it's something that you can take checkpoints along the way to see where you are. So that's where I got the 10 from. I think it's also unrealistic to have it too short. You just get disappointed if you set unrealistic goals. So I think they need to be realistic and achievable.
Oh, I really hope some people who listen to this really understand what you're saying here. And this is going off at the tangent a little bit, but if you have any thoughts about, because the labor market is so tight right now, right? So for example, I've just spoken to some candidates just yesterday who have been out of uni for less than 3 years. They understand that they're still learning, but they've really been thrusted into a pre-sales solution architect role, right? So when the market is such that they are open to giving people who may not have built all those skills opportunities like that. I think to do it well, you do really need quite a bit of experience, because it's not just about coding, right? It's also a lot about the business acumen and, really understanding how to angle and craft the technical solutions. I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of the market right now, where candidates might be saying, oh, I can't imagine myself taking 10 years. I see somebody else who's just been moving into this role just 3 years out of uni. What would be your take to somebody who perhaps is in that spot right now, whether they're thinking about work toward a goal that, perhaps at some time ago it was the norm, but maybe now that norm has been disrupted a little bit?
Yeah, I think good things takes time. If you want to achieve something, it takes time. There is no such thing as something coming up and you get that straight away. It's unrealistic. It's like saying that, you want to be built and muscular. You have to go to the gym, and doesn't mean you go to the gym once means you'll be, bulked up and muscular. You have to go repeatedly. You have to go over a period of time. All the training, the exercise will get you there eventually, but it's not something that happens straight away. So for those that want to get it straight away, I think probably reevaluates what's realistic. We all want that, but it does take effort. Doesn't come without effort.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, right? And I think in terms of like what I would usually also think about is that journey in terms of like trying to get to the end outcome so quickly. But if you're not going through that whole process, putting in the effort, I think if you try to shortcut that, right, I think it reveals itself to you pretty soon, right? I mean, you kind of hit the reality of in a position where you just don't feel well equipped enough to handle everything that's being thrown at you because you've actually not put in the time and training.
Yes. Absolutely.
So I guess I know, bring it back to you. I think when you actually, hit the objective of what you wanted to do to pivot into the solution architect role, I'm just curious, who gave you the opportunity to make this change, and what do you think they saw in you that said that, okay, Lionel's ready, let's kind of have him go into this role. Like, what was that story like for you?
I think in terms of there's a few people that collectively gave me the opportunity. One of them, I'll start with the recruiter. I worked with a recruiter previously. However, after leaving that role, we were still keeping in touch on a very regular basis. So I do see him as a bit of a mentor and a friend as well. And in one of our catch-ups, I think it was probably 7 years or so after we first initially met, he mentioned that he came across a role that he believes that would be a great fit. I wasn't looking at the time, but I remember telling him that I trust his judgment and let's entertain this opportunity together. It obviously worked out. A few others that I would also mention would be the leadership and the management of the company at the time. So the leadership of the directors and my manager at the time gave me the environment, the exposure, the freedom to learn and grow while working. What they offered allowed me to acquire new skills, and they were supportive of what I was doing throughout. And then one more person I'll probably credit this move to as well was one of the seniors I was working with. Full of knowledge, and he's always someone to look up to. His technical skills always kept me inspired. He showed me how much more I could still learn and develop. He also had the patience to work and train you regardless of what you know or don't know. In terms of what they saw in me, I would probably say work ethic. I don't often tend to give up too easily. I see my problems as challenges or puzzles that needs to be solved. So, if you're given something, you strive your best to get it completed. You strive your best to get it done on time as well, and to the best of your ability. So I would say that's probably what they may have seen in me to give me those opportunities.
And I can absolutely echo that, like in terms of, just working with you over this past year, right? I know we've had some opportunities to work on like some events together as well. I think just the level of the quality at which you put thought into things that arise for a discussion, you're always very well prepared. And I think in terms of providing different angles or perspectives of looking at something and some possibilities, apart on top of being very resourceful and in fact finding, different resources for that, it would have not been surprising if it was a one-off. But because it's consistent, and that's something that, at the end of the day, I think people kind of like, oh, you can leave it with Lionel, it will be done and it will be done on time. And not only that, right, it will be done in a very high quality. I think that's a really nice, kind of personal brand to have built for yourself. But Yeah, I just wonder, do you think that is something that you have intentionally kept as some of the principles of how you would approach everything in life? Or, is that just kind of something that is natural to you? I guess my question is, how intentional was it, right? Like this is something that in terms of who you are, your identity as a person, did you take time to, kind of hone it down to these few aspects?
I think in general, when we do something, we should always do it to the best of our ability. It's never nice when someone hands you something and it's half done, or not done properly. So I think from my perspective is, if I wasn't receiving it, what would it be like to receive the output of what I give to them? So I often do try my best to make sure that it's a pleasant experience or output for them. In that they need something, if it's passed to me, then I would make sure that what I do or what I deliver is to the best of my ability. Yeah, I think it's both conscious as well as unconscious in terms of the mindset of delivering 110% each time.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would say, it's been really nice to be at the receiving end of that. From my point of view, I think if anybody who's like listening to this and would like to join your team and they kind of resonate with that piece, like they also care about the experience of what somebody else is receiving in terms of the output of their work, I think that's really a good kind of sense of whether that's a good culture fit, right? In terms of if they are exploring roles, if your team, in terms of like going back to the part about after you've had all these different people who are in the way playing the different types of roles to help you get to this new opportunity in the solution architecture space. I'm just curious, do you have to do any pitch to them to convince them that you're a great fit for the role? There was definitely some conversations that you've had with the hiring manager. So I'm just curious, what do you think that you did in that process to stand out to land you the offer? Or was it more of a case of, I know it's amazing, and they only took a referral for you to like land this role? What was that like in that process?
I think the opportunity was both probably time, lucky in terms of time, as well as what was going on as well in terms of what I did. The person that was filling this role before, when obviously he moved to a different role, and he recommended to the managing directors that I would be best to take this role to fill that gap. At the same time, throughout the years as well, I've kind of been working with him, so I kind of knew what to do already. And how to do it. So I would say a little bit more of natural progression, as well as the time of the person before, his progression, and that void that was there, and how I could fit in and fill that void.
That's great. So in terms of like, there isn't any pitch that you had to do. And I think maybe just for that clarity, right, it sounds to me like, it was a role that you took on after coming into the organization, as opposed to coming from a different organization, right? The solution architect role.
Yeah, it's more of a progression within the company as opposed to going to a new company and starting that as a role.
Yeah. So do you think, looking back, would that be something that you would recommend to somebody who is looking to make the transition as well? Like to say, hey, if you are potentially doing some software development engineering role and you want to move into the solution architect role, try to find a company that has that pathway for you to kind of make that transition. Would that be something that you advise?
I wouldn't say I advise or would advise against it. I would probably say it depends on your circumstances. If where you are doesn't give you the opportunity, then it may be something you need to seek elsewhere. With where you are provides the opportunity, it's something that you could potentially work towards. But probably the main thing I would say is, if you keep doing what you're doing, then you won't naturally, learn or gain the skills required to move to a different role. If you want to do something different, you kind of need to do something different. So you need to expand to what you're doing or what you're learning to be able to fit that role in the future.
I'm just curious, right, if you also look at the present situation in this year that we are having this conversation, if you had to make that same transition again, do you think you would have done anything differently given the current circumstance that we are in 2023?
Yeah, I think you hear a lot of news about companies shedding roles in recent months and years. The industry is also, in a way, quite volatile. Would I make the same thing again this year? I would probably say yes, from the perspective that you do have some more stability in the career-wise when you are being promoted up or moved to a slightly different role within the company, as opposed to being the newbie in a new company. But if you were going to move around, there's definitely some research you should be doing, understanding the role itself, but also the economic and industry factors that may impact the role. 2023 is going to be very different from
Yeah.
all those years back.
I definitely agree with that. So, looking back in terms of this whole career change, I'm just curious, like, now that you have hindsight to look at that, do you kind of figure out, I know you've alluded a little bit to it in your responses, but the strengths and superpowers that perhaps made you feel like this is the right career change for you, do you have a better sense of what that is now that you've looked back, you think has made this like the right move for you?
Yeah, I think how happy you are in the role
Interesting.
can give you a sense of, was it right? Are you still content? Do you still wake up every day with the drive to do what you're doing?
Yeah.
Do you dread waking up just to go to work? Because that's the negative sign. So there's a lot of positive and negative signs in terms of your personal self to determine if you believe that it was the right move. Yes, we all have good and bad days. Every role has activities or aspects of it which you may not like, but you should look at it as a whole. Are you generally happy or not?
But do you know, what drives that level of happiness for you? In terms of what combination of factors that you feel you're happy in terms of when you wake up, like, hey, this is the right role, right place. What is that combination of factors?
I get that little kick every time we achieve something. You get a little kick inside you. So,
like dopamine.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
It could be as simple as there's this problem that you have to solve, and you're able to solve it. The problem initially presented itself to be something which is extremely difficult, or someone said to you that it's not possible, it can't be done, or it can only be done with X amount of resources and time. Being able to challenge that and beat that, or get it done, when someone says it's not possible, that gives you that little kick and makes you feel good about it. So for me, that's one of the key drivers for me. But also sometimes seeing, when you have customers, you're solving the customer's problem, the gratitude that they have for you to solve their problems or to resolve certain things, which has been annoying them for quite a long time. That is quite satisfying as well.
So now a lot of the part of your role, well, yes, you're still directly in front of clients, you actually have to help guide other members of your team to navigate all the challenges and obstacles as well. I'm just curious, how perhaps do you use your experience from before to help them navigate their paths and their development as a pilot engineer in the team?
Yeah, I think I try to replicate what I found was positive in my career experience. So things like giving them the right environments. I was grateful for the people who gave me the right environments, and in terms of space, the freedom, the exposure to learn and to grow. So giving my team that little space as well, helping them, in terms of they may not know something, but if you know it, give them the share your knowledge. Don't know it, bring someone else in to help them with that, or can you give them time to learn it? All the positive things I experienced in my career, I kind of want to give that to them. And in terms of everything else that I haven't experienced, it's more a learning experience for me at the same time. I come across scenarios where I have never been in, and having some mentors or a strong management leadership, you can speak to them and talk to them about different aspects and find out ways of addressing these things, and you learn from it at the same time as well.
So that the people who are listening can get a better sense of the kind of challenges, obstacles that you've had to overcome while trying to help our customers get to solve their problems. What was maybe one of those biggest challenges in terms of the situation that you faced before that you could share in, without naming names, of course, but in terms of what made it difficult and how do you overcome that you feel is really part and parcel of this role as a solution architect, right?
I mean, as customer facing, the biggest challenge is keeping your customers happy. Every customer has different needs. They all see different things on different levels. So what may not be important or critical to one customer is absolutely critical to another. And some customers have very challenging environments which they work in. So I would probably say one of the biggest challenges is with the customers. With regards to solving that, again, I see it as a bit of like a puzzle. What is the challenge? Let's break it down. How can we solve each and every small piece? And if you can break it down to understand the reasons why, then you should be able to solve all those little smaller problems.
I love how you're taking that engineering model and framework and then applying it to a human problem as well. And then that helps you to being very methodical to ensure that all the issues or all the key concerns are being addressed for the customer, right?
Yep. Doesn't always work, but Yeah, it's a starting point.
So we're coming more or less towards the end of the interview. I'm just curious, perhaps the last two questions I just have is what has been the most rewarding experience in your memory so far at Tricentis? Or is there any other, kind of maybe top two moments stand out for you that you could care to share?
Yeah, I'll probably say the most rewarding experience is the people. The people you work with, they're more of an extended family. You're probably going to spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your family, your personal family. So having people that are positive around you, that's important in that sense, is rewarding. It's a family away from your family. That's been the most rewarding experience for me at Tricentis.
Oh, that's very nice to share, Lionel. And this was absolutely not scripted, right? So thank you for sharing that. For people who are listening, who aspire to make the same leap from a software engineer to a solution architect, like what you've done, perhaps what is one key lesson you might want to share with them from your experience that you would like them to take away from that to aid them in their journey?
Yeah, from a career perspective, I think always be learning. Take every opportunity to learn, and surround yourself with mentors and leaders that inspire you. Surrounding yourself with them will help you drive and develop yourself further. It gives you insights to things that you may not be aware of. They could also potentially help you with your personal growth as well.
Yeah. And I think in terms of that, always be learning, that the concept is there. And I was just having a conversation the other week with someone who's been doing L&D, but I'm just curious that when you figure out what to spend your time learning and how you spend your time learning, do you have any tips of how do you kind of make the most of that investment of time, by either through the selection of what you want to learn or the approach in which you learn?
Yeah, I don't have anything that's fixed in terms of what I want to learn and what I should learn. If I see something that is of interest, or if I see that something's a gap, then I tend to write down a little list of things. And every now and then, when I've got some free time, I'll just look at this list and say, which one do I want to look at a little bit more? And then I'll either find a little short course or some articles, white papers, or some books to read about it. Taking in a lot of these smaller things in bite-sized chunks.
Nice.
That's typically how I spend a lot of my time learning, is reading all these small bits and pieces of information.
I like that how all the little bits actually add up to a list that you already have in mind that guides you, right? In terms of like, hey, this is linked back to actually what the broader picture of actually what I'm trying to learn. And this is just a small bit and then it adds up over time. It sounds like
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. So, but thank you so much, Lionel. I really appreciate the time and the sharing, and I definitely learned a lot more things about your journey than I did in the past year of working with you in this conversation. So, thank you for sharing your thoughts around this, and I know you definitely prepared, some great notes and stories. So, I really do appreciate that. I look forward to seeing you back in Singapore sometime, right? And then we can have a really nice meal the next time you're here.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Lionel.